This hasn't happened since World War II. Unbelievable. You're going to want to be paying attention. And more importantly, the state of emergency in Israel. Stay tuned. Welcome to Wealth Transfer. I'm Terry Saka. So before we get going, this is incredible stuff today. It has really been since World War II. And you have to remember, since World War II, that's when we really controlled most of the world's gold and we were changing the world's rules. And they're getting ready to do something again. So stay tuned for that. And I do want to get into the state of emergency in Israel. But before I do, I just encourage you, go to YouTube. It's the only social media but we do want to do YouTube because it does get out not just wealth transfer news at YouTube for the program, so you can send the program to a family or a friend that doesn't have their TV network in that area. Also, the podcast Rigged Against You comes out once a week on Friday. Really good, relevant information, about 10 or 15 minutes, and that also gets dumped onto the YouTube as well. And I encourage you to go there too. The reason I want to bring up the state of Israel, just briefly, because I do find it pretty extraordinary, and I do believe it's coming here to America eventually. Thank God half of our country has common sense, and they recognize the fraud that is taking place right now globally. But in the state of Israel, there are people trying to get the word out that the state of Israel is locked down. Like literally, you can't go in, you can't come out. They're just not reporting it. And what they're doing, though, when it comes to the vaccine in Israel, is so dystopian. 1984, it's unbelievable. But they're not only mandatory. It's a medical device. That's another conversation. But they're saying if you don't have, you can't shop in a store. You can't go to your job and work. And they're hunting people down. They're calling the people who won't get a Israel hardcores. And so what they're doing is they're pitting one element of society against another element of society. Sound familiar? So what they're doing is they're saying, for those who, for whatever reason, probably because they're forced to, they're basically putting them against those who won't take it and saying that every problem we have in Israel in these lockdowns is because these people will not. And they're violently pitting people against one another. So they can't go to stores, they can't go to shopping malls, they can't go to movie theaters, they can't get a job, they can't do anything unless they have. And then they're putting the population against them. And you say, well, who would know? Because they're using these passes, these COVID passes. And folks, this is insane because it's not. And what you're seeing in Israel, as the warnings are coming out, will come to these other nations. Europe is doing it too. We must stand and say no. Thank God half of our country is wise and smart, and half of our country believes that the whole mask mandate is complete joke. That's it. And what's happening in Israel right now is so unbelievable. It goes right to the core of evil. It goes to the core of all the movies we as Christians would watch when all of a sudden you become hunted because you're Christian. Don't think it's happening. You better wake up because it's happening for absolute certainty. It's happening in other nations, and in lieu of who's in charge of this country right now, you better believe it's going to be happening to us too. So we need to stay very vigilant, and I say start shaming people for thinking this is normal behavior, period. And if I did, you wouldn't like what I have written on it, because that's how blunt I'm being about it. are you going to be? So you've got to see what's going on, because today we're entering into a territory that we haven't seen since World War II, and this is really huge, because what it's going to do is push interest rates into negative territory, meaning the deposits in your bank account will be negative, meaning if you leave money in the bank, they will take money every month away from you. And then in the process of doing this, it's going to also explode the commodities market, and gold and silver, obviously, to new all-time highs for sure. But it's in the process happening now. Here's an explanation of it, and I'd like to explain it to you. I'll put it up while I explain it. The last time the Federal Reserve used yield curve control, YCC, was during the time of World War II. Why would it resort to such a radical measure now? Are we in global war? No. Here's the dirty little secret, folks. Too many treasury bonds are for sale. Too much debt. There aren't enough buyers. And that will force the Fed to step in. More than $3.5 trillion of U.S. government paper was issued in 2020 versus $2.9 trillion the prior year, and $1.9 trillion fiscal package that is just now coming out of Washington. Issuance in 2021 is slated to rise to $4 trillion in bonds that we don't have money for. That's a lot more than the Fed's Treasury purchase through quantitative easing, so the spread between QE and debt issuance gets even wider. Washington is doing so much fiscal stimulus that we're confident that this is going to force the Fed into yield curve control by this fall. That's the case. It will pressure the dollar lower, put commodities, value stocks, global cyclical materials, emerging markets into rotation overdrive. Now, yield curve control, that kind of sounds kind of nerdy, technical, financial. It basically means the Federal Reserve will have to go into the bond market. So basically, the federal government is creating this out of thin air. Then they're issuing 10-year treasury notes out of thin air because they don't have the money. It's an IOU. So they're printing an IOU up out of thin air, issuing it into the system. A bank is buying it, and then they're turning right around and selling it back to the Federal Reserve. So yield curve control means the Federal Reserve is going to be buying their own treasury bonds. The federal government's treasury bonds are issuing. Now, that's kind of money laundering and many other things we could say, but the point is they're getting away with it because they're in control and they're running it. But the thing is, it's not good for the dollar. It will destroy this dollar by design, I contend. This dollar is going down, folks, whether you believe it or not. And the fact we're at yield curve control mechanisms right now, we haven't had that level of intervention into our finance since World War II. Now, I've got some phenomenal data in here I want to continue to show you, and wait until you see who's backing up this call for yield curve control. I think you're going to find out that it's very real and it absolutely will happen. But I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be right back.
The world is at a tipping point. Our fragile food supply is being destroyed by locusts and fires. A global viral pandemic is collapsing the economic supply chain, impacting financial markets all around the world, leaving you and your finances more vulnerable than ever. Now is the time to protect and preserve your assets. Cornerstone Asset Metals is here to help you protect and preserve what you've worked so hard to gain. Whether you have IRAs to protect, 401ks to preserve, or cash in the bank, our asset specialists are here to support you. Call now and we'll send you urgent information regarding changes to the dollar and the challenges to our economy that you need to be prepared for. Learn how easy it is to roll over your current IRA or 401k into a physical precious metals IRA. We can even arrange to have your precious metals stored in a private vault or send it directly to your home. Do not delay. Call 888-747-3309 today. That's 888-747-3309. Invest in precious metals and create security in your future today. Call now.
Welcome back. Just know, folks, if you have assets to protect, especially IRAs, 401ks, you may want to get busy looking into that, giving Cornerstone a call. There is tremendous delays in production, tremendous delays in getting material. It can take 4 to 6 weeks easy to get material. It's just not available. That's why the premiums are high, and it's going to continue, especially when you start to see these prices start running higher. And so I encourage you, get busy now, because you will run out of time, or you will be waiting months on end to get your supply. So the yield curve control is extremely real. When they do that, when they go in and start buying those bonds, now remember, they haven't done anything like this since World War II. And yet World War II was about as drastic as it can get for the country's state of finance. And yet here we're at it right now. And they're blowing trillions out the door for things that completely are irrelevant, like bailing out San Francisco. That's a whole nother conversation. Look who's backing up the yield curve control and what they're getting ready for. Take a look. And yes, unless the Fed steps in, we may have negative interest rates among U.S. commercial banks as soon as a few weeks from today. JP Morgan's SLR problem points to negative deposit rates. Money funds, RRP capacity problem points to negative bills and repo rates. And yes, somehow everyone missed the JP Morgan's earnings release itself warned very clearly negative deposit rates are coming in 2021 should excess liquidity and higher capital become a fixture, which is about to be the case. Meaning excess capital, excess all this, it just means money printing. They just passed a 1.9 trillion. They're going to pass another few trillion. Like I said, the other program a few weeks ago, they're going to probably do upwards another 7 trillion. Now they're going to raise taxes too, destroy the economy, destroy corporations, destroy small business. But that's another conversation. That won't matter. The taxes they're looking to raise brings in like $200 billion a year for 10 years. So what? They just blew $200 billion between New York, bailing out New York and San Francisco or in California and in other Democrat cities. So you got to understand, $200 billion means nothing, but yet that in itself will raise and destroy the industry. Now, JP Morgan is saying negative interest rates are coming. Folks, your money sitting in your bank account, your money sitting in your brokerage account will get negative, meaning they will start taking money from you for leaving it in there. The days are gone where you're going to make income off of deposits. So why would you want to leave in a bank in this that's going to be crashing in value when you could be holding this, and if not at home, in a private depository where it's physical and real and away from the system? Very, very important. Now, one visual to help you recognize the issue we're at and where we're at with the debt levels, especially in relation to World War II, take a look. Now, this image is the U.S. public debt as to what we produce. And if you notice, we're not only equal to the level in the middle there of World War II, we're raging higher. Eventually, we're expecting the Fed to step in and lower long-term treasury rates. Likely, the Fed will implement yield curve control, manage interest rates across the entire curve. U.S. government has never been this much in debt, and rising rates will push the government into bankruptcy. In addition, rising rates slow the economy, which is not what the Fed wants. Did you catch that part? Now think about it. We're at a high debt level more than World War II, when in World War II, we didn't have this kind of debt besides the war. We had all the gold coming in. I mean, we were starting an opportunity to boom. And look at where we're at today. We have more debt per capita. This 1.9 trillion, with a total of 6 trillion now total in bailouts they've done, has added to every single family $69,000 in debt. And every individual that's watching right now, you now owe the federal government $17,000 just for the bailouts. Now, they can't raise interest rates because we can't afford the payment on the debt. Our government will go bankrupt. You see the gravity of our problem. And then we got this footloose, well, I won't go there, politically. What's being done in Washington is unbelievable. What's being done across our country is unbelievable. It is the wrong time. Well, no, it's not. Not if you actually want to destroy the nation. Interesting, huh? And for those of you on the left that don't think the left wants to destroy this country, you're kidding yourself. They want to destroy it to remake it in their dystopian, utopic weirdness, perversion. That is very serious. That debt level. I can't explain since World War II to have that much debt at a time the world is in the condition it's in. Our country is in a very serious, precarious situation. And I'm only saying it in that way not to scare you, because if you actually have your assets in the right place, hence things that God gave us, you're going to be far better off than in the paper world. Absolutely. So we have in the cycle of things, and I call this more like not the super cycle, but why it's so important to shift out of paper, equity, bond into commodity. Take a look at this. Couldn't get any more stark than this. Now, this image is of the commodity price index going all the way back to 1800. Now, what you just have to know is on the top where the red line and the red peaks are, every one of those were world wars. War of 1812, Civil War, World War I, Cold War, and then we come down to the bottom. On the bottom of this graph is every Great Depression. The first depression, the long depression of 1800s, and then the Great Depression of the 30s, and then where we are in the current depression. Right now, the current depression on the bottom. What does that mean? That means the commodity super cycle is getting ready, meaning there's going to be a major demand, which there is. There is a serious food crisis globally, and you in the United States don't understand it yet because we actually have our own food. We grow our own food. We're not really importing per se, we're exporting. But there is a serious food crisis coming, and you're going to see massive price increases here in the United States as well. That's why preparing for assets anyway and your savings, things like this, as they go up in value, it allows you to still buy products, goods, and service at the same price. But the commodity super cycle has begun. We're at the lowest level of this I've ever seen since the 1800s. The ricochet to the upside will be ferocious, and why things like this will be hundreds of dollars an ounce probably. Because it's just the matter of that this is going in the toilet, going to zero eventually by design, of course. And that's when they usher in the Great Reset. It's when they also usher in the central bank digital currency. Now, another visual to kind of help you with the commodity cycle of things. This one's a little cleaner to see. Take a look at this. This is a commodity to equities ratio. And the bottom line is on the bottom is where you see the circles. That's where you've had stock bubbles, the tech bubble. Look at where we're at on the right side. We're lower on this ratio than we ever were going back to 1970, which basically tells us we're walking right into a massive commodity bull run, which will be things like food, corn and soy and wheat, and it will absolutely be things like this. Now, they're manipulating, and you're lucky they're manipulating it right now because you can still buy it at a reasonable price. But I promise you, folks, you're still going to want to buy silver at $100 an ounce. And at that point, it's going to get difficult to get, but you're still going to want it because if you're in this, you're going to lose a vast majority of your standard of living and savings in the future, period. So you just have to, pay attention to that part of it. Now, there's another interesting chart I have to show you, which is unbelievable for me. We're hitting a kind of a pinnacle point we're at right now. And when you see this, you'll understand what I mean. Once we've hit this point, which we're at, it doesn't look good to the downside for the stock market, meaning there's something really big and ugly coming to the stock market, why it's so imperative to consider getting out now. And for those people that are being encouraged by their financial advisors, oh, we got all this money printing, stay in, stay in. Let me just tell you, you're taking a risk to maybe a 10 or 15% upside to a 50, 60, 70% downside. Not worth the risk. I would highly encourage you get diversified. I would be giving Cornerstone a call. If anything, start the process of education. Got to take a quick break. Be right back.
The world is at a tipping point. Our fragile food supply is being destroyed by locusts and fires. A global viral pandemic is collapsing the economic supply chain, impacting financial markets all around the world, leaving you and your finances more vulnerable than ever. Now is the time to protect and preserve your assets. Cornerstone Asset Metals is here to help you protect and preserve what you've worked so hard to gain. Whether you have IRAs to protect, 401ks to preserve, or cash in the bank, our asset specialists are here to support you. Call now and we'll send you urgent information regarding changes to the dollar and the challenges to our economy that you need to be prepared for. Learn how easy it is to roll over your current IRA or 401k into a physical precious metals IRA. We can even arrange to have your precious metals stored in a private vault or send it directly to your home. Do not delay. Call 888-747-3309 today. That's 888-747-3309. Invest in precious metals and create security in your future today. Call now.
Welcome back. So before we get going, I do want to say, I think we all should stand in agreement that we pray for the nation of Israel, and we pray for the people, that those who have the strength to stand up for freedom of their bodies and freedom of rights to number one, free speech, but two, have a right to control what type of psychopathic stuff and drugs and medicines they want to stick in somebody's body. And we just pray and stand in agreement with the nation of Israel that God will be there to protect those who are going to stand up for this truth. But in the NASDAQ, this is interesting. It's a NASDAQ and S&P ratio. Now, the last time this has happened, we had a massive crash, but the point is we're rolling over. So take a look at this. This is a NASDAQ 100 relative to the S&P 500. But if you know on the left, that big mountain, that was the year 2000 when we had a massive market crash, not a massive market crash. Then we've been building up ever since. Right now at the upper right corner, you can see we surpassed, but we've just dropped below that trend line. And dropping below that trend line tells us we are getting ready to roll over into a major crash in the market system. I'm just saying it's the data. Going forward, things can always change, but I can tell you folks, when there's this much data screaming one thing, it's plus or minus a month or two or whatever it is. Why would you want to take that chance with your hard-earned future and your standard of living? Now, what we know is coming, as I started out the program talking about the crisis that's happening in Israel and Western Europe, by the way, and even in Texas for that matter. If you would have seen the video of a lady who got tackled to the ground because she wouldn't wear a mask in a bank. What? Like, I'd be suing that guy for like this. I don't understand these mask Nazis in this country. It's embarrassing. It's shameful, and you embarrass me. You embarrass anybody who has critical thinking, and especially our president who wears two masks. I mean, let's get real here, folks. This is what's coming to America as what was in Israel if we do not say no. No more. It's up to us, we the people. Take a look. The statement is access denied, and that's what's coming to America. If you heard my producer's theory about it, one day we'll do it, you'll see digital dollar is a high priority for those in control. They must first destroy your ability to make a living, then make you dependent on the government. Once that happens, watch out. And if you don't agree with the sick psycho perversion of the liberal left, you're going to be access denied. Now, my producer, I don't got too much time, I got to tell you this, has a great theory that when access denied, what that means, eventually they're going to shut down the internet. 'Cause remember, President Obama gave away the internet to the world community. Totally evil thing to do, by the way. No way. And here's why. Eventually in the future, what they'll probably end up doing, if you are one of the non-compliant, one of those fall in line and bend over because here comes the freight train, and you don't do what we tell you, they're going to shut off the internet. You're going to shut off the internet. You won't get access to the internet. They're already doing it in Facebook jail. They're going to shut off the internet on you. Well, you violated our policy, therefore you're non-compliant, therefore you don't have access to the internet for 90 days. This is how they will control us in the future. And then next, it'll be access to food. You don't think so? That's going to be the problem for America, because I think most Americans have their heads so buried in the sand, they're not willing to acknowledge what is coming in the realm of evil. All this stuff right now in our administration is being controlled by Luciferians. Evil at the hardest core. People who believe killing a baby at 9 months is okay. People who believe in the sickest of perversions. People who believe in warping and destroying and that's who is in charge. And we just got to kind of walk this out from the spirit and try to get back some of what we've lost, if we can. At the end of the day, here's what's coming to the market system. You better get ready. Take a look at this. Basically, this is a commodity chart that goes back 200 years of the dollar. If you notice on the left, that's when we were under the gold standard. On the right, you see the gyrations up and down, the whipsaws of putting money in, taking money out. Bottom line is the Dow ratio, Dow gold is now 15 to 1 in 1980. It was 1 to 1. The next target is half to 1. The Dow Jones will likely fall 97% next to gold. Now, I don't know what that number is. If the Dow Jones is at 32,000 right now, and it has to fall that much to reach gold, is it going to collapse completely? Or is gold going to rise up to $15,000 or $20,000 an ounce? Good luck getting your hands on it, folks. It's getting more difficult to get even now. That chart is 200 years old. It shows the abject, I think, fraud of the Federal Reserve System, which just needs to go away in America, and we need to go back to basic finance. But that gyration of money in, take it out, cause Great Depression, money in, take it out, cause great recessions, put it in. They're messing with your future. Right now, the money has been going in, bailing out the banks and bailing out the people. Next, though, is taking it, the collapse of the dollar, and why you better have some of this. So until next week, prayers again for Israel, prayers for the Christians in this nation, that we stand together with wisdom, understanding, and yes, I know, a little love. Until next week.
The world is at a tipping point. Our fragile food supply is being destroyed by locusts and fires. A global viral pandemic is collapsing the economic supply chain, impacting financial markets all around the world, leaving you and your finances more vulnerable than ever. Now is the time to protect and preserve your assets. Cornerstone Asset Metals is here to help you protect and preserve what you've worked so hard to gain. Whether you have IRAs to protect, 401ks to preserve, or cash in the bank, our asset specialists are here to support you. Call now and we'll send you urgent information regarding changes to the dollar and the challenges to our economy that you need to be prepared for. Learn how easy it is to roll over your current IRA or 401k into a physical precious metals IRA. We can even arrange to have your precious metals stored in a private vault or send it directly to your home. Do not delay. Call 888-747-3309 today. That's 888-747-3309. Invest in precious metals and create security in your future today. Call now.